Yo, Havik Nation, what's up, man? Hey, listen, this is a video that I have been waiting for. I didn't know if it was going to happen, but it did. Neil deGrasse Tyson's response to Terrence damn Howard. I've been waiting. I was wondering, man, if Neil was going to say anything, and I am so glad that he did, and he titled it My Response to Terrence Howard. So we know it's direct. So we just gonna jump into it, man. His response to Mr. 1 × 1 = 2. Let's talk about it. Come on, NDT. Let's go.
I recently learned I got name checked by Terrence Howard on his recent appearance on Joe Rogan.
By the way, it was I couldn't even watch it. Like, it was just so much wild stuff being said, and yeah, it's a hard watch for me, at least.
I reached out to Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was like, "Hey, man, yeah, I'd love for you to come on my show, do my radio, do my TV thing. Would love that." I was like, "Yeah, but I've got something I want to introduce to you."
I got name checked because 8 years ago, he sent me a 36-page treatise.
And it was only 36 pages.
So this is Terrence Howard attempting to
See, this is what I'm talking about. Receipts, baby. He holding the whole thing right there. Please read every line. Let's go.
Invent mathematics and physics.
What'd he say?
Attempting to reinvent mathematics and
attempting to reinvent mathematics and physics. Reinvent
physics. A little backstory there. I took initial interest in Terrence because my mother said to me, "Do you know Terrence Howard?" I said, "Yeah, I know." You mean the actor? She said, "Yeah." Well, I heard him interviewed on NPR. On there, he said that, like, when he was a kid, he wanted to be like a scientist and study the universe. I said, "Well, that's cool. Okay, maybe we'll get him on Star Talk." We love talking to celebrities who have a soft geek underbelly. At the time, I didn't quite know how to get in touch with him, but we met at something called the Upfronts, which is where networks present their next season's TV shows.
I saw him at an event Upfront.
And then this came in my inbox. In this particular case, since I basically solicited it from him, I actually spent time reading every line of all 36 pages. And
good.
I commented. My comments are in red here. You see that?
That's how you review.
I spent a lot of time on it. And I thought, out of respect for him, what I should do is give him my most informed critical analysis that I can. In my field, we call that a peer review. You come up with an idea, you present it either at a conference or you first write it up and you send it to your colleagues. It is their duty to alert you of things about your ideas that are either misguided or wrong, or there's the calculation that doesn't work out, or the logic doesn't comport. That's their job. Not all ideas will turn out to be correct. Most won't be. But to get to that point, you need to know things like, what has everyone else said about this same subject? Am I repeating someone else's work? Is this a new insight that no one else has had, but has foundations that are authentic or legitimate or objectively true? Am I making a false assumption? Am I making an assumption that someone else has already shown to be false? All of this goes on the frontier of science. Let me make it clear that I'm delighted when I see people with active minds trying to tackle the great unknowns in the universe.
Exactly. People that just kind of have that mindset of trying to challenge things and kind of have that mindset to want to know this and want to, try to think outside the box for a lot of different things and stuff like that. I'm all for it, man. I think that's great. That's how we've come across and found and discovered a lot of what we have because of those mindsets. But you also have to have that tested You got to have it, repeated, right? You got to be able to reproduce some of those things. You got to be able to execute those theories. Like, you have to be able to do more than just talk about it, right? It's got to be successful analysis, experiment, so on and so forth. You got to be able to, replicate the things that you're talking about for it to become accurate or it to become a science or something like that. So I understand challenging it, but you also got to be able to kind of prove outside of just yourself that what you're saying is true.
It's a beautiful thing that people want to participate on this frontier. What can happen is, if you're a fan of a subject, let's say, a hobbyist, let's call it, it's possible to know enough about that subject to think you're right, but not enough about that subject to know that you're wrong.
Exactly. So that's basically confidence, right? You know a lot about a subject, a particular topic or something like that. I know a lot about space. That's why I follow Neil as an astrophysicist. I know a lot about space. I love space. I love the universe and all of that stuff. I just like it. I like to study it, read about it, listen to it, all of that. Knowing about a subject a great deal makes you feel confident, like you know everything, and whatever you come up with or say or challenge against somebody else, that you're going to be right. But the point is you don't know everything. And because you don't know everything, you don't know enough about that subject to know when you're wrong. And I think that's the thing that kind of bugs me the most about a lot of Terrence Howard's claims, because all of his claims completely go against every physicist on the planet, which is wild. You know what I mean? Everybody is wrong. That's directly from his mouth. Everybody is wrong. Everybody else is wrong. That's wild, because these are people that know way more about it than he does, because it's literally what they've done their entire lives, and it's their career, and they do it every day for a living. But they also know what they don't know, and therefore can be challenged, or for example, in a peer review, to know when they're wrong and test the theories again, run the math, run the numbers, until they come to a conclusion that people agree with from all angles. But again, you can't just talk to be talking.
And so there's this sort of valley in there, a valley of false confidence.
This
has been studied by others, and it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the phenomenon where a little bit of knowledge, you over-assess how much of that subject you actually know. And then when you learn even more, you realize, no, I didn't know as much as I thought I did. So then there's a sort of a lull there. And then when you learn even more, you come back up. Ultimately, learning enough to know whether you were right or wrong. To become an expert means you spend all this time. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't just sit in an armchair and say, I'm now an expert. It requires years and years of study.
Like I said, their whole life.
Looking through journals where new ideas are published and contested. That's what we have learned is the most effective means of establishing that which is objectively true, or determining that which is objectively false. Both of those work hand in hand to move the needle on our understanding of the universe. I'm going to read you just my opening line here.
Let's go.
It's titled 1 × 1 = 2.
1 × 1 = 2. So here's the thing about that, right? 1 × 1 = 1, okay? Most of us know this. I can't believe how many people I saw agreeing with Terrence Howard. Oh my God. 1 × 1 does not equal 2, okay? 1 + 1 = 2. Here's where Terrence is wrong, okay? I understand what he's trying to say, but that's just not math. 1 times 1. So I think he even used an example of like $1 times $1 does not equal $1. You would have $2. Well, guess what? He's right about that. If you do $1 times another dollar, guess what? You got $2. But that's not the math. That's not what's supposed to be happening there. You can't use the same constant, instance, or variable. They have to be different. Your 1 cannot be the same 1 on this side. That's why he's coming up with 2, because he's using the same thing, which then just makes it addition. Okay? 1 times 1 means I have one thing, one time. One thing, one time. That's my 1 equals 1. Okay? So if I have 1 apple, and this is Terrence's theory, 1 apple times another apple, then sure, I would have maybe 2 apples. Maybe you can argue that, but that's not what the math is supposed to be saying here. You're supposed to be saying 1 apple times 1 box. So I got 1 apple in 1 box. 1 in 1 equals 1, because I still have 1 apple and I still only have 1 box, no matter which way you look at it, right? If I want to do 1 times 2 equals 2, I have 1 apple in 2 boxes. So 1 apple in each box. So I got 2 apples. You reverse that, and I have 2 boxes. No matter which way you do the math, the numbers work. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 apple in 3 boxes. I got 3 apples, bruh. That's how it works. But you can't do 3 apples times 3 like that doesn't really work. You have to have some difference in there. And again, his example of $1 times $1, that doesn't really work. You have to do $1 times a given number. Then you get your math, because $1 times 5, not $5, times 5 gives me $5. It's just $1 times an actual given number. So that's where he's confused, in my opinion. That's how he's coming up with the numbers he's coming up with, and then thus bases everything else that he has said thereafter on that idea alone. But that idea is flawed, because that's not the multiplication. That's not the math. And that doesn't work. So
I lead off by saying, this is an ambitious work that is a clear indication of a restless, active mind. Ooh. Within these pages, however, there are many assumptions and statements that are underinformed, misinformed, or simply false, thereby compromising or nullifying many of the subsequent conclusions you have drawn. That's exactly what should happen in a peer review, out of respect for one another's intellect.
So the fact that he went this deep with it means that he actually did value what Terrence Howard had to say, because he did this like he would any other colleague that's been in the business and the field with degrees, right, their entire lives. He actually gave Terrence Howard the same courtesy that he would any other person in the field. That's pretty big.
It opens with a quote from Terrence. It can never occur that the square root of a given number, when added to itself, is greater than the initial number squared, for that would expose a loose thread within the fabric of our understanding, a loose thread capable of unraveling the very ground rules of mathematics. That's a bold statement.
Yeah,
so then I just
heavy.
Say, this opening thesis is false.
Ooh.
There are plenty of examples of this that have escaped your attention. His statement is shown to be false for every number that's less than 1 and greater than 0. For
less than 1 and greater than 0. Okay. Terrence wrote, it can never occur. So if you have examples less than 1 and greater than 0, you already have even just one example that negates his entire statement. You only need one number. You only need one number to negate that statement.
For example, the square root of 0.64 is 0.8. 0.8 is bigger than 0.64, and it's a larger number than the original. And 0.64 squared equals 0.4096, a smaller number than the original. To the extent that the next 35 pages depends on your stated thesis.
See, this is what I was saying. Like, if you based everything else you wrote on the rest of those pages, you're going to be wrong about most of it, if not all of it, because your initial theory is wrong.
Fact undermines your claims and assumptions and conclusions. It's not about feelings here. It's about objective reality. So at the time, I considered Terrence a strong acquaintance, and we hung out a bit and had much exchange. We haven't spoken much since then. But go to page 2, and in here, he mentions people who he declares were persecuted because their vision exceeded the myopic view of their contemporaries. And he mentions Walter Russell, Nikola Tesla, John Keeley, and many, many more. Regarding your list of people who have made brave sacrifices, I note that to be a genius is to be misunderstood, but to be misunderstood is not to be a genius. The work of Russell, Walter Russell, has eluded any experimental support, and the work of Keeley is generally not reproducible.
Generally not reproducible. This is exactly what I was saying. If you're going to have a theory, it's got to be able to be tested, and then it's got to be able to be replicated. That's how science works. So if you're mentioning these people, Russell, Keeley, that there's no experimental support for, and then the work of Keeley says is generally not reproducible, then what are you supposed to do? You can't do anything with that. If you can't reproduce it, then how was it factual?
Science is about reproducibility. I can have
facts,
the most brilliant, crazy, fun idea ever, and if I perform an experiment and no one else can duplicate that experiment, it belongs in the trash heap.
It's nothing,
It's
right?
me in my own world, thinking I have landed on an objective truth, when in fact I haven't. That's how science works. The reproducibility of results. As for the work of Tesla, much of it had very real value to physics and our understanding of electromagnetism.
Right,
and that value is duly recognized by my community in the naming of a unit of electromagnetism after him. You can't get more badass than having a unit named after you. Newton has a unit named after him.
Right.
For example, the metric unit of force is a Newton. Much of the rest of his work was fringe and unrealized, either for violating known laws of physics or for being simply impractical. Just because you do some good stuff doesn't mean everything you ever did is going to be great. I will further affirm that just because an idea sounds crazy doesn't make it wrong. The system of research and publications in peer-reviewed journals has the capacity to spot crazy but true ideas, provided they're supporting by compelling arguments, and ultimately supported by experiments and observations. Newton's laws, Einstein's relativity, quantum physics were all revolutionary ideas that appeared in peer-review settings or journals. Meanwhile, most of the work of Russell and Keeley had no such success with their ideas.
And there you go. That's the difference. That's the difference. You take something like Einstein's theory of relativity, which was criticized, challenged, tested, contested, and then proven to be true over time, although incomplete because there were things that he just hadn't considered yet, right? When you start talking about like black holes and stuff. But what he had was right up until a certain point. But people were able to reproduce and test and run the math and have things add up. But if you take people who had theories where you can't do any of that, then those theories are just kind of null and void. They just are.
So I think on Rogan, Terrence said that I trashed those three researchers.
Attack that I had talked about Walter Russell and Victor Schauberger and John Keeley and Tesla as the people that I looked up to. So he threw shit on he was like, well, Tesla stuff worked, but Tesla was never really respected and out there.
When I'm just...
That's not what he said at all. Tesla wasn't respected and out there? Come on, dude. That's not what he said at all. In fact, it seems that he's very articulate about what he said. Very precise about what he said, too. Their theories and some of their works were not practical or reproducible. Like, that's very different than he shit on. Damn, that's a reach, bro.
Simply stating the fact. I don't think of that as trashing. I think of that as being honest. I mean, I could have softened it, but I don't think that's what people who care about you should do. People who care will be honest with you about ideas, about thoughts. The world is changing so quickly, and so is everything around us. Unfortunately, we have chosen to remain handcuffed to antiquated and obsolete beliefs. We have put an enormous amount of faith into the methods and practices of old that are as dead today as the men who propagated the notion that the world was flat. So I say here, regarding your world was flat reference, it's not widely appreciated that the idea of a flat earth predates the introduction and development of the methods and tools of science as we practice them today.
Sure, there was a reason why people thought the earth was flat then. Especially if you're out in the sea in a boat for weeks and months at a time and you're not hitting or seeing any land and you think at some point you're just going to fall off there. Sure. But today there's just no excuse for it. But people still believe.
Processes date back to around 1600, coincident with the invention of the microscope and telescope. Before then, truths were whatever seemed right to the senses. Afterwards, and to this day, truth was whatever the verified data obtained by your instruments forced you to believe if your senses otherwise contradicted the data. This fact means that there's no such misunderstanding on the scale of the flat earth in the era of modern science.
Right.
And in multiple places throughout the treatise, he's attaching a number to a physical idea or a physical object. That idea goes way back, by the way. Go back to Pythagoras, famous for the Pythagorean theorem, which we all learned in 8th grade, was it, or 9th grade? Pythagoras was also a philosopher who tried to understand how things worked. He felt, among others in his group, that if you assign a number to something, the number can imbue that object with certain meaning and significance, which means then if you manipulate the numbers, that you gain insight into the objects themselves once you've assigned a number to it. There's a lot of that permeates this document, but it's a long disproven approach to the world. Again, there's nothing wrong with a failed idea. Now other people note it.
That's like that Jim Carrey movie, I think, right? The number 23. Not a lot of people saw that, but a number that's kind of equated to objects and everything, and you can kind of understand and mathematically manipulate life itself because everything has a number and stuff like that. But like you said, that's been longly disproven and, you know, stuff. It's an interesting theory.
Right? That has value. If we place a candle in front of a mirror, the measurement of light is doubled, is it not? It does not measure as only one light source. We actually see two lights. A light meter will show twice the intensity of light. This is false.
He attacked it so with such vitriol.
Huh, dude? He attacked it? You was that dude in school when the teacher was grading your paper. Attacked. He said attacked. This is clearly a very direct and, you know, blunt, I should say, peer review. He's used the word attacked multiple times so far.
Maybe that's too blunt. What else should I say? I'm a scientist. That's what I would tell a colleague. A colleague who then say, would thank you, and then we go out for a beer after, because that's how that works.
Right.
And there's an old saying. I first heard it from Michael Dell of Dell technologies. If one day you find yourself the smartest person in the room,
you're in the wrong room.
Change rooms.
You're in the wrong room.
I say this is false.
You're in the wrong room.
The light in the mirror appears dimmer than the source of light itself for several reasons, starting with the fact that no mirror is 100% reflective. But more importantly, the candle in the mirror is always farther away from you than the candle itself. So the light meter will always read less than twice the actual value of the candle itself.
Now that makes sense to me. The light meter will always read less than twice the actual value of the candle itself, because you're talking about the same size candle and it being at a further distance. That should mean that it does measure, even if slightly less nonetheless. Now, if you had a farther away flame, not a reflection, but a different light source that was bigger and brighter than the light in the foreground, then sure, the light meter might reflect that the foreground or the background light is bigger and brighter. But in this case, he's trying to talk about the same light source being read as twice the light source, seeing two lights and stuff, that measuring equally. So yeah, that's again another interesting theory, but just kind of seems like that wouldn't be the case. So I'm glad he said that. And then he said no mirror is 100% reflective. That's an interesting fact too.
I will note that from this work, Terrence
that's those things he
produces
making.
Art, sculptural art, which I find to be intriguing.
That joint
and
right
beautiful.
there.
To me, more intriguing than beautiful, because you got to look at it and you keep looking at it. Like, what is that? And what's going on there? I just want to read you my ending comments here.
Here we go.
I could not follow the reasoning on these last few pages, but the illustrations that derive from them are beautiful, regardless of how they were.
So Terrence basically created these shapes that I think, from what he was saying on a lot of different stuff, like he had different things for a certain type of flight and all of this type of stuff. And just these illustrations are supposed to kind of further represent and prove that his theories are correct. But I guess Neil here is saying, I couldn't follow the reasoning on these last few pages. It's only 36 pages to begin with. So a few pages is a lot. And he read those few pages and didn't understand what the hell was going on. Astrophysicist didn't know what the hell he was talking about. But the illustrations that derive from them are beautiful, regardless of how they were derived. It's a nice way of putting it.
Derived. My notes have been strongly critical of your reasoning and conclusions.
Very honest.
I was candid and blunt out of respect for the energy you have clearly invested in this work.
See? Respect for the energy you have clearly invested. So he recognized that he was invested, did work, did his own research, albeit true or false, or misguided, misunderstood, whatever. Point is he did some work here. And he respects that energy and time that he put in to it.
But if you're sure that you are still right and that I have completely misunderstood your thesis, then you will need to look for another person to evaluate what you have done and solicit their comments. Review. In any case, like I say above, the images and illustrations in your final pages are beautiful works of art, unlike any I have seen. Best to you, Neil. So,
this is what Terrence Howard was crying about. This is what he was saying he was attacked. This is where he said Neil shit on some of our greatest scientists.
Oh, in case people wanted to know.
Yeah, well,
what actually went down.
I did. I wanted
8 years
to know.
ago. Just always be cautious of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You put in a little bit of work.
You see how he also still has it? 8 years ago. What he clearly says is rubbish, don't make no damn sense, and he still has it. He didn't delete it, throw it away, never to be seen. He still has it. He has his comments and everything that he wrote and responded to him from almost a decade ago. From somebody that's not even in his field, not even a scientist. He still has it. Let that speak too.
And you have an idea, and then you think your idea is right, and that Einstein is wrong, and Newton is wrong, and that everybody's wrong, and that all of modern astrophysicists are wrong. That's bold.
It is.
That's bold. Audacious. Bodacious. When continental drift was proposed, it was like, what? Land masses are moving on Earth's surface? That's a weird idea.
That probably sounds crazy.
That's going to be a hard sell. We think there's sort of upswelling of yes, locally, but whole continents, that's crazy. It would take a few decades until ultimately, when we're mapping the bottom of the ocean, we find that there's a mid-Atlantic ridge that the ridges are separating. It's like bada bing. So the resistance to jumping on the idea that continents move was not because people were stubborn. It was because people are cautious. Any new idea needs to be put through the ringer. That's how science works. You put it through the ringer. Every possible test you can. Not just because it happens to look like South America fits with Africa. Any better evidence than that? Oh, wait a minute. Fossils matched between the west coast of South America and the east coast of Africa. Not recent fossils, fossils from millions of years ago. That's interesting. Things that make you go, that brought some more people over to the camp. You keep that up, and you reach a point where enough evidence is brought to bear on the question, and then you have a new emergent truth. But at the vibrant energy that goes on at conferences and the contest of ideas, that's how we roll. That's how it works. When Einstein came out with relativity, saying space-time curves, Al, what are you saying? What are you doing? Well, you can test it. The total solar eclipse. So the idea comes out in 1915, is published in 1916, 1919. We measured light around the edge of during a total solar eclipse, because you can't see the stars during the daytime. You see the light rays bent from their actual coordinate positions on the sky. Sir Arthur Eddington, an astrophysicist, provided the first experimental evidence for Einstein's general theory of relativity, which, by the way, was published in a peer-reviewed journal. Crazy idea.
That's a mic drop.
To be accepted.
That's a mic drop. That's a mic drop. That's Einstein being peer-reviewed. Einstein.
For the ideas is not social media. It is not Joe Rogan. It is not my podcast. It is research journals where attention can be given on a level that at the end of the day offers no higher respect for your energy and intellect than by declaring that what's in it is either right or wrong or worthy of publication or not. I wanted to post this to my website so you can see my comments mixed in with his treatise, but you got a sense of it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Neil deGrasse Tyson here. As always,
keep looking up. Let's go. There you have it, folks. NDT, Neil responded to a diss track. This is how you do it. This is how you respond to a diss track, man. The whole receipt. Hey, Drake, Kendrick, all y'all, take some notes. I would like to see Terrence on Star Talk. He has celebrities on all the time, or celebrities that call in and ask questions and stuff like that. Terrence, go sit down on Star Talk. And let's have an in-person, face-to-face conversation. Because you might think you know more than what you do. But Neil will set that straight. But again, just like Neil said, man, you know, some people, they know so much about a topic that they don't know when they're wrong about something because they don't know about those areas. So, you know, who knows? Maybe that won't be a good conversation, but I would still like to see it. Anyways, that was my reaction to that. I've been waiting for a response from him ever since all of those claims came out. So And there were some people who were actually disappointed in Neil because of Terrence's claims. People were upset that Neil treated Terrence Howard that way, when you can now read the paper yourself and the feedback and everything like that and the criticism and the honesty and see that he didn't treat him any kind of way. He actually treated him like a colleague, which he did not have to do. So there it is. All right, y'all. I'll see y'all next time. I'm out of here. Havik Nation. Be easy.